You hearing me, old man? Or is that hearing aid turned off? The voice was young and sharp. Lieutenant Ryan asked this. His voice cut through the low noise of the dive bar like a knife. He leaned over the old wooden table. His shadow fell over the man, sitting alone in the corner booth. Tommy Wilson did not look up. He sat very still like a statue made from old stone. His eyes stared at the orange liquid in the shot glass in front of him. He was 72 years old. He wore a red shirt that had seen better days and a canvas jacket that smelled of rain and wood smoke. His hands rested on both sides of the glass. They had wrinkles and age spots, but they were steady, perfectly steady. I said, "Are you deaf?" Ryan repeated louder this time. He was showing off for the 4 other young Navy SEALs standing behind him. They held bottles of expensive beer and wore grins that said they owned the world. "We need this booth. It's for active duty only. The Veterans Center is down the street." Tommy slowly lifted the glass to his lips. He took a sip, enjoying the burn of the cheap whiskey. Then he set it back down with a soft clink that sounded loud in the sudden quiet. He finally raised his eyes. They were gray, a bit cloudy from age, but they had a depth that felt like looking down a very deep, very cold well. "I'm fine right here, son," Tommy said. His voice was like gravel rolling down a dry hill, low and unbothered. Ryan laughed, a dry, mean sound. He looked back at his group, wanting their approval. They gave it to him with snickers and nods. Ryan turned back, his jaw set. He was fresh off a successful mission. He was riding high on adrenaline and feeling invincible. He saw an old man taking up the best seat in the house, someone who didn't understand the pecking order. "You don't get it," Ryan said, placing a heavy hand on the table, getting in Tommy's personal space. "We're celebrating. We're the tip of the spear. You're just taking up space. So unless you have a seal pin under that shirt, I suggest you grab your cane and shuffle along." The fight had begun. The air in the bar grew heavy. Everyone looked, but nobody moved. The Rusty Anchor was the kind of bar that served people from the nearby Navy base. It was a place where sawdust covered stains on the floor and neon signs buzzed like annoying bugs. It was a place for loud stories and louder lies. But tonight, the group of young SEALs in the center had sucked all the air out of the space. They were the top dogs here, or so they thought. Tommy sighed, a sound of deep tiredness rather than fear. He shifted on the vinyl bench. The material cracked under his weight. He picked up a napkin and slowly wiped a water ring from the table. "I paid for my drink," Tommy said softly. "I'll leave when it's empty." Ryan's face turned red. He wasn't used to being told no. Certainly not by an old civilian who looked like a strong wind would knock him over. Ryan's ego was fragile, currently blown up by recent victories, and this refusal felt like a needle poking a balloon. "Look at him," said Mike, one of the other SEALs, stepping forward. "He probably thinks he's tough because he did one tour in the kitchen in '75. Hey, Grandpa, what was your job? Peeling potatoes or cleaning toilets?" The group burst into laughter. It was cruel, sharp laughter meant to hurt. Tommy didn't flinch. He kept staring at his drink, watching the light shine through the whiskey. "You guys should show some respect," said a voice from behind the bar. Joe, the bartender, was a large man with a thick beard and a history in the Marine Corps that he rarely talked about. He was wiping a glass hard. "He's not bothering anyone." "Stay out of this, Joe," Ryan snapped without looking back. "This is Navy business. We're just trying to figure out who we're sharing our air with." Ryan turned his attention back to Tommy. His eyes got narrow. He saw the way Tommy sat. It wasn't the slouch of a beaten man. It was the stillness of a hunter waiting. Though Ryan was too young and too cocky to know the difference, he mistook the stillness for freezing in fear. "Come on," Ryan goaded, leaning closer. The smell of expensive beer on his breath washed into Tommy's face. "If you're going to sit at the Warriors' table, you have to pay the toll. Tell us about your service. Who were you? Did you ever even leave the ship?" Tommy stayed silent. "I bet I know," Ryan continued, his voice dripping with meanness. "You were a clerk. Or maybe supply. You spent your time counting stuff while real men were out there doing the work that lets you sleep at night. That's it, isn't it?" Tommy reached into his pocket. The movement was so fast that for a split second, Ryan flinched. His hand twitched toward his waistband before he stopped himself. He realized how dumb he looked, reacting to an old man reaching for a wallet. Tommy pulled out a crumpled $10 bill and placed it on the table. "For the drink," Tommy said to Joe. He started to slide out of the booth. He had decided it wasn't worth it. The quiet dignity of leaving was better than a fight with children. But Ryan wasn't done. He felt embarrassed by his flinch. He needed to get back on top. He stepped in front of Tommy, blocking his exit. "Not so fast," Ryan said, crossing his arms. "You don't just walk away when I'm talking to you. You want to leave? You answer a question first." Tommy stopped. He looked up at Ryan. For the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. It was brief, like a ripple on water, but it was there. "Get out of my way, son," Tommy said. Ryan laughed. "Or what? You going to hit me with your arthritis? Look, it's a simple question. In the teams, we have call signs, names earned in blood and mud, names that mean something. I'm Viper. That's what they call me because I strike before they know I'm there." He pointed to Mike. "That's Sledge. He breaks things." Ryan leaned in, his face inches from Tommy's. "So, if you were ever anything more than a paper pusher, you would have a name. What is it, old man? What's your call sign? Or did they just call you Private Nobody?" The bar went dead silent. The question hung in the air, a challenge that demanded an answer. The disrespect was heavy, pressing down on the room. Tommy looked at Ryan, really looked at him. For a second, the dive bar dissolved. The smells of old beer and floor cleaner vanished, replaced by the thick, rotting smell of a jungle floor. The air was no longer cool. It was a suffocating blanket of heat and wetness. The neon lights were gone, replaced by a thin slice of moon cutting through thick rainforest. Tommy was young again in this flash. Mud smeared across his face. His breathing was shallow and controlled. He was holding a knife, not a drink. He was alone. He had been alone for 3 days behind enemy lines, tracking a target that whole groups of soldiers had failed to find. He moved through the plants without disturbing a single leaf. He was a ghost. He was a myth. He remembered the voice of his commanding officer over the radio, crackling with static. "We have no help in the area. You're on your own, Reaper." Reaper. The word echoed in his mind, bringing with it memories of things done in the dark, of heavy weights carried so that others could live in the light. The weight of that name was heavier than any armor. It was a name spoken in whispers by friends and in terrified screams by enemies. The flash ended as quickly as it began. Tommy blinked. The jungle faded back into the grimy reality of the rusty anchor. He looked at the young, cocky face of Lieutenant Ryan. He felt deep pity. "You don't want to know," Tommy said softly. Ryan threw his head back and laughed. "Oh, I think I do. I think the whole bar does. Come on, let's hear it. What did they call the man who filed papers? Speedy the Stapler?" Joe, the bartender, had seen enough. He had been watching Tommy closely, not with the eyes of a regular person, but with the eyes of a man who had seen combat. When Tommy had reached for his wallet, his sleeve had ridden up just an inch. It was a small thing, unnoticed by the loud seals. But Joe saw it. It wasn't a tattoo. It was a scar, a burn mark, perfectly circular, branded into the inside of the wrist. Joe froze. He had heard stories about that mark, rumors passed down in quiet voices in military clubs and sleeping quarters for 40 years. It was the mark of a unit that didn't officially exist, a unit that worked so far off the books that even the CIA denied knowing them. They were the ghosts of the Vietnam era and the Cold War. Joe dropped the rag he was holding. His heart pounded against his ribs. He looked at the old man. The stillness, the dead eyes, the complete lack of fear. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a veteran. This was a legend. Joe backed away from the bar, moving toward the office door. He needed to make a call. There was a number taped. Inside the safe, a number given to him by the owner of the bar, a retired admiral with strict orders. "If you ever see a man with a circular brand on his right wrist, you call this number. You don't ask questions. You don't get involved. You call." Joe burst into the office. His hands shook as he dialed. He listened to the ring, feeling the seconds tick by like hours. "Hello," a voice answered. It was sharp and commanding. "This is Joe at the Rusty Anchor," he stammered. I think he's here." "Who is here?" "The Reaper," Joe whispered. "The man with the circle brand. He's here, and there's a group of young SEALs giving him a hard time. It's about to get ugly. Silence on the other end of the line, so deep that Joe thought the call had dropped. Then the voice returned, colder than ice. Do not let them touch him. Do not let them disrespect him. I'm 3 minutes away. Keep the peace, Joe, or God help us all. Back in the main room. The tension had stretched to its breaking point. Ryan was no longer laughing. The old man's refusal to play the game was making him furious. It felt like a direct challenge to his power. I'm making this an order, Ryan barked, his voice cracking slightly. I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Navy. You will tell me who you are, and you will leave this table. Tommy stood up. He moved slowly. His joints popped loudly. He stood at his full height, which was only 5'9", much shorter than Ryan, but somehow in that moment, he seemed to tower over the lieutenant. I was serving this country before your father was born, Tommy said, his voice steady. I've earned my seat. Now move. Ryan's face went purple. You listen to me? You washed up old... He reached out and shoved Tommy. It wasn't a violent shove, just a push to the shoulder to emphasize his point, to physically move the obstacle. The moment Ryan's hand made contact with Tommy's jacket, the air in the room seemed to shatter. Tommy didn't stumble. He didn't even sway. He simply looked at the hand on his shoulder, then up at Ryan's face. That was a mistake, Tommy whispered. Joe came running out from behind the bar, jumping over the counter. Lieutenant, stand down. That's a direct order from the owner. Stand down. Ryan spun around. Shut up, Joe. This civilian... He's not a civilian, you idiot, Joe roared, placing himself between the two men. Ryan shoved Joe aside. His blood was boiling. He turned back to Tommy, his fist clenched. I'm going to teach you a lesson in respect, old man. Ryan raised his hand, ready to grab Tommy by the collar and drag him out the front door. He wanted to embarrass him, to show the room who the alpha was. He was past the point of reason. Then the front door of the bar exploded open. It wasn't a kick. It was a tidal wave of force. The heavy wooden door slammed against the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Every head in the bar snapped toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was not a group of military police. It was a single man. He was wearing a dress blue uniform, perfect, with rows of ribbons that stacked almost to his shoulder. The stars on his collar caught the neon light. It was Admiral Carter, the base commander. Behind him stood two men in dark suits. Their earpieces were visible. Their posture radiated deadly intent. Admiral Carter stepped into the room. The silence that fell was total. It was a vacuum. The music had been cut. The clinking of glasses stopped. Even breathing seemed to stop. Ryan froze, his hand still half raised toward Tommy. His eyes got wide as he recognized the Admiral. He snapped to attention so fast his spine cracked audibly. Admiral on deck, Ryan shouted, his voice shaking. The other SEALs scrambled to attention, spilling beer in their rush. They stood rigid, eyes locked forward. Terror replaced the cockiness on their faces. Admiral Carter didn't acknowledge them. He didn't even look at them. His eyes were locked on the old man in the corner booth. Carter walked across the room. His dress shoes clicked on the hardwood floor. The sound was the only thing in the universe. He marched straight past Ryan, brushing the lieutenant's shoulder as if he were a piece of furniture. Carter stopped 3 feet in front of Tommy Wilson. The Admiral's face was like stone, but his eyes were shining. He looked at Tommy's weathered face, the gray stubble, the tired eyes. Then slowly, with precision that would make a drill instructor cry, Admiral Carter raised his hand in a salute. It wasn't a regular salute. It was a salute of deep, lasting respect. He held it. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Tommy looked at the Admiral. A small, crooked smile touched his lips. He slowly raised his hand and returned the salute. Casual, but with the grace of muscle memory that never fades. At ease, David, Tommy said softly. Admiral Carter dropped his hand. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. It's been a long time, Master Chief, Carter said, his voice thick with emotion. We thought you were dead. We lost track of you after Panama. I like being dead, Tommy replied, sitting back down on the bench. It's quieter. The room stayed frozen. Ryan and his group were paralyzed. Their minds were racing, trying to understand what was happening. Master Chief, Panama. The admiral was saluting an enlisted man. Admiral Carter turned slowly. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by cold fury that made the earlier tension seem like child's play. He looked at Lieutenant Ryan. Ryan was sweating badly. Drops ran down his temple. "Lieutenant," Carter said, his voice low and dangerous. "Sir," Ryan squeaked, "do you know who this man is?" "No, sir. He wouldn't give his name, sir. He was refusing to leave the booth for active duty people." Carter stepped closer to Ryan. He got in his space just like Ryan had done to Tommy. "This man," Carter said, making his voice loud, so every person in the bar could hear, "is Tommy Wilson, but you wouldn't find him in your databases. His file is black. It's been black since 1968. Carter pointed at Tommy. "When I was a brand new officer in the Mekong Delta, my patrol boat was attacked. We were taking heavy fire from 3 sides. We were sinking. We called for air support, but the weather was too bad. We called for rescue, but they said it was too dangerous. We were dead men." Carter paused, his eyes boring into Ryan. Then out of the trees one man came. One man. He didn't have a squad. He didn't have air support. He had a knife and a rifle. He moved through that attack like a scythe through wheat. He took out 3 machine gun nests in under 4 minutes. He dragged me and 6 of my men 3 miles through a swamp with a bullet in his leg. Carter looked back at Tommy with deep respect. We asked him his name. He didn't say a word. We asked for his call sign. He just looked at us and disappeared back into the jungle. We later found out the enemy had a name for him. They called him the Reaper, because when he showed up, life ended for them. Ryan's face was the color of ash. He looked at the old man in the red shirt, the man he had mocked, the man he had tried to physically remove. He felt sick rising in his gut. Carter turned back to Ryan. "You asked for his call sign, Lieutenant. You wanted to know if he was a cook. This man has more confirmed kills with a blade than you have days in the service. He's the reason the SEAL teams have the reputation they do. He wrote the rules you're trying to learn. And you tried to throw him out of a bar." Ryan couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Silence!" Carter roared. The sound shook the walls. "You're an officer. You're supposed to be a leader. And here you are bullying an old man because you think your pin makes you a god. This man earned his pin before it even existed. He is the grandfather of your warfare. And you treated him like garbage." Carter ripped the patch off Ryan's uniform, the unit patch on his shoulder. The sound of it tearing was violent. "You're a disgrace to the uniform, Lieutenant. You and your men are confined to quarters right now. You'll face a review board tomorrow morning. I will personally strip you of your command. Now get out of my sight before I forget I'm an officer and handle this the way the Master Chief would. Get out." Ryan and his group scrambled. They stumbled over each other, rushing to reach the door. They didn't look back. They fled into the night, their careers in ashes, their cockiness shattered. The door swung shut behind them, leaving a ringing silence in the bar. Admiral Carter turned back to Tommy. He straightened himself, smoothing his uniform. "I apologize, Tommy. I should have taught them better. The standards are slipping." Tommy chuckled softly. He pushed the empty shot glass toward the center of the table. "They're young, David. They're full of fire. They just haven't been burned yet. Don't be too hard on them. They just need to learn that the ocean is deep and there are always bigger fish." Carter nodded. "Can I buy you a drink, Reaper? For old time's sake?" Tommy shook his head as he stood up, his knees cracking again. "No, I think I've had enough noise for one night. I just wanted a quiet drink." He buttoned his canvas jacket. He looked small again, just an old man ready for bed. But nobody in that room would ever see him as just an old man again. As Tommy walked toward the door, the people in the bar, bikers, locals, off-duty sailors, parted for him. They stood up one by one without a word being spoken. They stood. It wasn't a military formation. It was a ragged, messy line of respect. As Tommy passed, heads bowed. Someone clapped slowly, then stopped, realizing silence was the higher honor. Tommy paused at the door. He looked back at Admiral Carter. "David," he said. "Yes, Tommy." "Tell the bartender the kid paid for my drink. He left a 10 on the table, but the kid's ego should cover the rest." Tommy pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. Carter watched him go, a look of deep sadness and pride on his face. He walked over to the table where Tommy had been sitting. He picked up the empty shot glass. He held it up to the light. For a moment, the bar stayed silent. Then Joe, the bartender, cleared his throat. "Admiral, what can I get you?" Carter set the glass down gently. "Nothing, Joe. Just leave this glass here. Nobody sits at this table tonight." Carter turned to the room. "You all saw nothing tonight. Is that clear?" "Clear, Admiral," a chorus of voices replied. The Admiral nodded and walked out, his security detail following him. The door closed. The hum of the neon sign returned. The music stayed off. Joe walked over to the table. He looked at the water ring, now drying on the wood. He looked at the empty glass. A memory. The jungle rain is heavy, hammering against the leaves like machine gun fire. It's 1969. Tommy is 22. He's lying in the mud, covered in leeches. He's been motionless for 12 hours. Below him in the valley, a prisoner camp. He sees the American POWs. He sees the guards. He checks his watch. He checks his knife. He touches the circular burn on his wrist, a self-made reminder of the circle of life and death. He stands up. The mud slides off him like oil. He doesn't run. He flows. He moves toward the camp, a shadow detached from the night. The first guard dies without a sound. The second sees him but sees only a blur, a ghost, a reaper coming to collect. Tommy whispers one word into the darkness as he begins his work. Back in the bar, the mood had changed forever. The air felt sacred. In the days that followed, the story of what happened at the Rusty Anchor spread like wildfire through the base. Though no names were ever officially used, Lieutenant Ryan was quietly transferred to a desk job in Alaska. The other members of his group were put through a tough retraining program focused on history and humility. A week later, a small package arrived at the bar for Joe. Inside was a bottle of very expensive, very old whiskey, and a note written in shaky handwriting. "Keep the table open." Tommy. Tommy never came back to the Rusty Anchor. He didn't need to. He had his quiet, he had his dignity, and he had reminded a new generation that the most dangerous things in the world often look the most harmless. Somewhere in a small house on the edge of town, an old man sat on his porch, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise. His hands were steady, his eyes were clear. He was just Tommy to his neighbors, but to those who knew, to those who had felt the temperature drop when he spoke, he would always be the Reaper. And the silence he left behind was the loudest sound the world had ever heard. If you enjoyed this story of hidden valor and lessons learned the hard way, please like this video and share it with a friend. Subscribe for more stories about the heroes walking among us.